If I took over your clinic tomorrow, here's the exact sales system that I would install. It's called the Transformational Selling Blueprint. Hi, my name is Dr. Robbie Woelkers. I'm one of the physical therapists and co-owners here at Rehab CEOs. I previously ran an outpatient physical therapy clinic that we grew into 3 locations. In 2021, I sold my shares back to my partner. And then we have an 8-figure agency now that helps physical therapists grow and scale their clinic without more of their time. So in this video, what I want to be able to do is explain to you exactly why most providers struggle with sales. And then how do we actually get good at sales? And then what are the sales systems that we need to put into the clinic in what specific order? And I'm really excited about this video because I teach some of these parts, but I haven't really put it all together into one deep dive training. So if you stick with me throughout this process, I will show you how to improve your intake calls, your evaluations, your routine visits, your progress summaries, discharge, and then also how to be able to sell back-end wellness and add-on services like dry needling, laser, so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do, the first thing I want to do is let's kind of set the stage here. So this is going to be a clinic that has 4 providers, and let's just say they're doing about 60 slots or 40-minute scheduling. So we're going to just pretend that when I take over a clinic, right? Because I'm going to take over a clinic here and I'm going to install a system. I'm going to install this system in a clinic that has about 4 providers, 2 admins. So most clinics that are trying to grow and scale and get the owner out of treatment, they need about 4 providers and 2 admins in order to do that. So if you're on this video and you're a startup clinic, just go ahead and comment below and message the word startup. If you guys have a solo location with providers, go ahead and comment how many providers you guys have in your facility. And if you're a multi-location that have multiple locations and multiple providers, just go ahead and put multiple in the chat. I would love to see like how big of a clinic you guys and what the size is, because I get to see, solos, startups, I get to see solopreneurs, and then, multi-clinics as we grow. So the reason why I mention this is because each one of you guys will be at different levels. And I'll kind of mention like, if you're a solo owner, this is where you should focus. If you're multi-clinics, this is where you should focus. So just a heads up on that. So the first thing we're going to do, 4 providers, 2 admins. So we'll keep these numbers in mind a little bit later. So the first thing that you should be aware of is most physical therapists and most providers really struggle when it comes to selling. Okay. So when it comes to selling, they kind of put a frame around this that like selling is bad, right? And the reason for that is I think that most individuals, it's not because of, there's usually 2 reasons why people struggle with selling to people. Number 1 is because they have this thing called commission breath, where you are trying to make a sale for your reasons because you make money off of it, right? But I don't think that that's the majority of it, because most people aren't productivity bonus and stuff like that. I think the real reason is most people are selling from their own pocket. We have a lot of student loans. For whatever reason, we have some objections when it comes to selling. Maybe we didn't have good selling experiences in the past. Maybe we went to buy a car or phone, whatever it is. So maybe you shut down a little bit when you're being sold to. So therefore, you don't like to sell to other people. Also, not a big deal. We've been indoctrinated to that money is evil, right? Money is the root of all evil, right? People who are rich are filthy rich. Money is dirty. I remember when we were younger, I used to touch money and my parents would be like, hey, you touch that, wash your hands. You don't know where that been, right? People who are corporate, they call them capitalist pigs. Like even the villains in movies, right? If you ever watch Batman, like the Joker, he's the villain. He is stealing from the bigger villain, which is the corporate bank. And that's why in the beginning of the scene of The Dark Knight, he goes in and he's robbing the bank and he's able to get all this money, right? Because we got to steal from the bank. So it's crazy. We are indoctrinated to default to like money is inherently bad. Now, do I believe that money is bad? No. I don't believe that at all. Do I believe that money will make you happier? Right? It's just like, I think that money will only amplify who you are as a person. And when it comes to selling, and if we're selling from our own pocket and your belief is, right, I would never pay $200, $250, $300 for an evaluation or a routine visit, then how could I ever expect my patients to pay? Or the economy, right? How could people afford these things? And so I want you to understand that the goal here on this video, specifically in the beginning, is we have to disassociate our own kind of belief system with reality, right? And we have to understand that most of us will be showing up with some level of negative bias. Now, the cool part about this, and I give you guys permission to kind of think a little bit differently, is when it comes to selling, the way that you can kind of get around this is that I want you to understand that if you're trying to convince somebody to buy, and convincing means to sell something for your reasons, right? You make someone an offer so you make more commission. Versus persuasion is where you guys are making an offer to a patient and it's for their reasons, okay? Convincing, your reasons, persuasion, their reasons. Now, what does this look like is I want you to understand that if a patient was to sign up for physical therapy, your life isn't going to change all that much. If anything, you're going to have to do the eval and the notes. It might be a little bit more, a little bit busier on your side. However, if a patient signs up, their life could significantly change. And that's where I want you guys to understand. Like if a patient signs up for physical therapy, your life might not change all of that much, but their life could significantly change, right? Because not only will they have a physical transformation, right? Not only will they have a participation transformation where they go back to whatever activity they were looking to, get back to, they're going to have a personal transformation, right? Because when they first started, they are a totally different person. They're irritable, they're agitated, they're stressed, all the things. And then when which by the way, like that's getting them to show up as not the best mom or the dad or brother or whatever, colleague. And then they're going to have a transformation to the personal side. And that's why we call this transformational sales. Now, in order to have a transformation, right, we need to make sure that we have transformations regarding the patient at different phases. I'm going to walk you guys through that in this video. Okay. So the first thing I want you guys to understand is we do just need to dissociate ourselves a little bit because we do have some biases towards money for whatever reason. But we have to understand that we're going to switch our mindset a little bit. And we got to focus that if we have a great product and we truly believe, which by the way, sales is really hard. If you don't believe your product is good, but most of you guys have really good products. You could go read some of your Google reviews. I'm sure your patients tell you guys are great, right? You get the old attaboys and pats on the back. You're doing great, right? Now we just need to understand that if we have a great product, it is our moral obligation to help as many people as possible. Okay, so that's number one. The first thing I want you guys to understand is it's okay to default to negative. It's okay to default to, selling is bad, money is evil, whatever, right? All people, PT clinics that only care about money is a mill, whatever. But I want you guys to go sit with your thoughts for a second. And then we just need to understand that actually selling is a good thing because we are doing it for the patient's reasons and not ours. If we can empower somebody and inspire them to take action, and they actually get a result, I think that's a good thing. Okay. So why are we going to break this down? If I came into your clinic and I wanted to install a sales system, what kind of system would I install? Well, first of all, I always want to understand and look at where are the break points when it comes to selling. So number one is going to be, we have leads and we have to be able to get them onto an intake call. Okay. Then what's going to happen is we got to get those intake calls to schedule an evaluation. Then we need them to be able to arrive. And then we need to be able to do a benefits check for my out-of-network and my in-network folks. So let's just do benefits check. And then we're going to get them to sign up for a plan of care. And then what we want to do is they come in for visit number 2. They come into the progress note and we get them to graduation. Okay. So that's a lot in a little bit. So here's what this actually looks like. We kind of call it like an infinity loop. Kind of looks like this. Okay. So what we're going to do is understand that the goal here is we need to be able to generate leads. We call this our reach operating system, where the main goal here is to be able to generate leads. Okay. So we want leads from this system. That's the main output. Then those leads are going to hit intake, schedule, arrival, and benefits check, right? There's a system in the middle. We're going to call this our registration okay, operating system. So we need to be able to get a lead to show up for an evaluation and then actually start their evaluation. So now we got the eval, and then we're going to have the confirmation that the eval went well by they show up for visit number 2, get them to the progress note, which is typically visit number 10. And then we're going to be able to get them all the way back here to graduation. Okay. This is going to be known as reputation. Okay. So this is going to be our reputation operating system. Now, when we get them to graduation, the goal is to be able to get a review, teach them how to refer, and then also get them to return in the future, right? So they're coming back into the clinic. So what this looks like is we have leads, intake, schedule, arrival, benefits check, eval, second visit, progress note, graduation. They leave a review, they refer, and then return. So we're going to get leads from them. They're going to return, and it looks like this, okay? Now, most clinics that typically struggle with selling or sales, what that's going to look like is they are going to hit some constraints, okay? So let's say they're getting leads, but for whatever reason, they are lacking in this department, right? For whatever reason, they are not able to get leads to become evaluations. Now, instead of having throughput, they turn on their Facebook ads, right? Which is great. So here comes their Facebook ads. They're getting leads, but then all of a sudden, they're not able to get patients through the system. Okay. So we need to be sure that these things work in unison. We're getting leads. We're able to get those leads to convert into evaluations. And then we get those evaluations to be able to show for all their appointments. They get to the progress note, and then they're able to graduate successfully. Okay. So here's how to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and talk about leads, right? How do I get my leads onto an intake call? Okay. So the first thing I want you guys to understand is that you want to be able to work backwards on your numbers. One of the easiest ways to get better at sales is understand you got lead, intake, schedule, and arrival. Okay. And let's just say you need 10 evaluations to be able to fill your clinic. And you can put your own numbers here. Okay. Now, if we're going to send X amount of leads into the system, right? And by the way, a system is just input, process, output, right? So it's just like we are output, not but. There you go. So let's just say you guys are going to send leads into the system. So then what's going to happen is we need lead engagement, we need intake, we need schedule, we need arrival, and then they are able to show for their evaluation. Perfect. Okay. So that's what we mean by a system. It's just like we want to be able to get a lead to an eval in as fewest steps possible. So that's number one. Now, what does this look like here? Well, the first thing is if you need 10 new patients and you have a conversion rate of 30%, then realistically, you would need 33 leads in order for you to get 10 new patients. Now, let's just say you need 10 new patients and you have 20% conversion, you would need 67 leads. And if you have 10 new patients you need with 10%, you would need 100 leads. Kind of crazy, right? And then as you start to go, let me pull out my calculator just so I don't give you the wrong information. Let's go 10 divided by 0.4. You would need 25 leads. And then let's just do one more, 10 divided by 0.5. You would need 20 leads. Okay. So if you plot this out on a graph, it looks like this. It's like 100 leads, 67, 33, 25, 20, right? Not a huge difference between this and this. Massive difference here. Okay. So one of the easiest ways to be able to get more leads to convert into evals is we need to be able to increase our front office conversion rate. Now there's two things, possibly three that we can do. Two are really, really huge. And then one of them, if you have an arrival issue, I can show you what that looks like. So the first thing is we need to understand how to get leads, right? How to get leads to be able to show for an intake call. Okay. Now, the number one thing I want you guys to be aware of is there's two things in play. Number one is going to be speed to lead. Okay. And then number 2 is going to be this thing called the 5 by 5 by 5 method, right? We kind of call it Hell Week, and I'll explain that in a second. just bear with me. It sounds brutal, but it's not. So speed to lead. Speed to lead basically means there was a really cool research study that was done. I believe it was by Harvard Business. They basically found that the number one reason why people drop off from intake or from lead to intake is because of the speed it takes to respond to the inquiry. Okay, so what does that look like? Is that it kind of looks like a graph similar to your conversion above. So if a lead comes in and they are contacted within the first 5 minutes, there's an 80% conversion rate. If it's between 5 minutes and 30 minutes, well, then it is going to drop all the way down to a 40% conversion rate. Okay. And then if it's over 30 minutes, it drops all the way down to 10%. Okay. So I'm not a mathematician, but if you're following along at home, that if you call your leads within the first 30 minutes of them coming in, you have a 40% chance of getting them onto an intake call. So what does that mean? So that means that if you had 100 leads entering your clinic, that if you're able to call them in the first 5 minutes, 80 of them actually make it to an intake call. If you do in the first 30 minutes, 40 of them make it to an intake call, 10 of them make it to an intake call. Well, you would have to have a 100% conversion rate the rest of the way through in order to get your 10 evals, right? So if you're at 40, you have a little bit more wiggle room, or if you're at 80, you have a lot of wiggle room, right? So it's one of those things that how do we get a system in place to be able to get leads answered quicker, right? So now these days with AI, you could have an AI agent, answering the leads, answering the questions, and then setting them as an appointment for your front office to be able to do an intake call, which, by the way, we are doing high ticket sales. We are selling custom plan of cares, high ticket packages. So we have to do it over the phone. Okay. The next thing is that you could follow up with email, or you could follow up with text messaging, or you could follow up by simply calling them, right? So we want to have a combination of automations, right? Either through AI or text or email. And then we also want to be able to have a human connection as quickly as possible. AI is great, but it's not a human. Okay. So we want to have human connection because people want to feel heard. They want to be asked questions. They want to so we want to make sure that we have a human interaction moving them over to an intake call. So that's the first thing that we would do, is make sure that we fixed your speed to lead. Now, for whatever reason, if we're not able to get a hold of somebody, which, 20% here, 60% here, and then 90% there, right? What's happening with these leads? Well, we run them through this thing called Hell Week. Now, sounds really brutal. I wish we had a better name for it. But realistically, I was, I was talking to a lawyer friend, and he does what we do, but just for lawyers. But the only difference is they actually run ads, and then they actually sell the list to the law firms. And he was telling me that he had a case where both lawyers were in the same city and got the same list. So he had 2 law firms. And what this looks like is he gave law firm A, right, a list of, let's just say, 1,000 people. And he gave law firm B the same list. It was the same one. They both purchased the same list. Okay. So how this works is law firm A, he went to them and he said, "Hey, how did it go?" And they said, "Well, honestly, not good." And he goes, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, we only got one case out of the whole entire list. One case. We had 1% conversion rate." He said, "Oh, well, that's interesting." He goes, "Well, let me go over to law firm B and see what they did." Now, law firm B was just like, "Hey, man, I don't know what you did, but I want more of that. Those leads are awesome." He goes, "We got 70 new cases." 70, right? So law firm A got 1, law firm B got 70. Now, they both had 1,000. Now, granted, this is kind of looking at the math here, right? 1 versus 70. It's a big difference. So he went back to law firm A and he said, "Well, hey, just curious, what did you guys end up doing?" And he goes, "Well, obviously they got the text, the email." He's like, "But we just called them the one time." And he goes, "We called everybody." So we did 1,000 phone calls. We called everybody one time. And he went back over to law firm B and he leaned in. He goes, well, what did you guys do? And he goes, we did the 5x5x5 rule, also known as Hell Week. He goes, what is that? He goes, what we did is you gave us the list. And he goes, we know that it takes anywhere between 9 to 15 points of contact for someone to make a decision to buy. He goes, so we did 5 calls, 5 texts, and 5 emails. So 15 points of contact in 5 days. And that was it. And it was the difference between 70 cases and 1. Okay. So if you guys are trying to get more leads onto an intake call, one of the easiest things that we would do is we would put speed to lead into your practice. And then the next thing that we would do is run them through Heck Week. Okay. Right. So now what happens is they're on an intake call. Okay. Now this is where I want you guys to understand when it comes to systems and stuff, people get a little confused, right? So if we got inputs, right? So now all of a sudden we got an input, we got a lead hopping on an intake call, right? So then we're going to run them through a process, which is going to be our intake call process and our scripting and whatever that looks like. And then ultimately what's going to happen here next is we're going to have an output, which hopefully they actually schedule an evaluation, right? That's the system. And I don't want you guys to like lose sleep over it or anything, but it's just input is we got a lead, right? And by the way, systems, you just stack systems on top of each other. That's all. So we had a system to get leads onto an intake. Now we have a system to be able to get leads, right? To be able to show up for that intake call. And then how do we get that intake call person to schedule an evaluation, right? Sounds fair. But one thing I want to show you guys, most clinics is they got a lead and then they're going to not have a process. They're going to have a star performer, right? Or a person, right? They're not going to have a process. They're going to have a person and then we're going to get an output. Well, if that person decides to leave, which usually happens with a patient care coordinator or office manager, whatever that looks like, well, now all of a sudden we're screwed. So I need to be able to put something in place that everybody could follow. They could get the same result. Okay. So what do? Right? What does this look like? So first and foremost, the biggest thing when it comes to intake is our front office providers or patient care coordinators, office managers, they need to have 3 things. Okay. Number 1 is they're going to have a conversation. They have to be conversational. Number 2 is they have to have call control. Number 3 is they have to have confidence, right? They have to have confidence. And we want to make sure that they have conversation, call control, and confidence. If they have all 3 of those things, the intake call is going to go great. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to give them some kind of script, right? Some kind of script that they could use that no matter what patient they have inside the business is they want to be able to run through that call script. So what is this going to look like? Okay. So this call script is going to be patient. Okay. This is going to be what we call our patient framework. Okay. Now the patient framework is something that we've created, but we've also consulted with other people who are in sales, specifically high ticket sales. And I remember speaking with the individual who kind of walked me through this. And he goes, I don't think you understand how easy it is to sell physical therapy. And I said, well, I don't know if I actually agree with that because, I think it's difficult because we have so many clients and some of them are, saying that they can't convert or whatever. So he goes, I want you to understand something. He goes, people are in actual pain. So it has never been easier to sell to someone, or physical therapy is one of the easiest things to sell because people are in actual physical pain. He goes, I got people trying to sell people solar roofs just to cut down their, electric bill by like $30. And he goes, I got people trying to sell door to door and people that don't even have problems. He goes, but you have people who are actually in physical pain. So if they're in physical pain, he goes, it's easy to sell. He goes, but what I'm about to teach you, make sure you use it for good and not for evil. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I'm going to take you guys through the patient framework. So the first thing when you are on a call is you always want to go over the purpose of the call. The purpose. Okay. Purpose of the call. So how that typically sounds is, ring, ring, right? Hey, this is Robert over here at XYZ Physical Therapy. Let's just call it like P4 or whatever. So it's like, this is Robert over here at P4 Physical Therapy. And the purpose of this call is, that's it. Right? The purpose of the call. Hey, the purpose of this call is we're going to ask each other some brief questions. I saw that you had some issues going on with your shoulder. And at the end of this, if we feel that we could help you, then we will go ahead and, make you an offer to get scheduled for an evaluation. Does that sound fair? Right? So that's the purpose of the call, right? So you want to be able to hop on the call. Hey, the purpose is we're going to ask each other some questions. And if we feel that we could, help you, we'll make you an offer. Cool with that. Okay. So then the next step in the process is going to be A. Okay. So A stands for agitates, right? So this is where we are going to agitate the problem. Okay. Now, what's going to happen here is when it comes to agitating the problem, there's three things that we need to be able to do. Number one is we want to see how the problem is showing up on a physical level. Number two is how is the problem showing up on a participation level. And number three is how is the pain showing up on a personal level. So what does that sound like? So number one is when a patient comes in and they're on the phone and, maybe it's their shoulder, they'll say, okay, well, hey, is it your right shoulder? Is it your left? And they'll say, no, it's my right shoulder. And well, is it the front? Is it the side? Is it the back? Right. So you're just trying to get some intel on what body part and where specifically is it hurting. So they'll be like, well, it's the front of my shoulder. Hey, well, thank you for sharing. Now, when you say it's your shoulder, what activities or what is your shoulder pain preventing you from doing? Now, the patients will then lean in and they'll say like, well, I can't work, or, I'm not able to play pickleball, or I'm not able to, hold my new baby without discomfort, or I'm not able to play with the grandkid, whatever. Right. So this is more the participation side. And then the last one, you could say, well, I know for me, when I have shoulder pain or when I'm unable to do any activity or workout, I know I get a little irritable, agitated, maybe even curious, how is that showing up for you? Okay. So now we want to meet them at the personal level. Okay. Now this is huge. And this is something I want you guys to understand. So we're going to go physical, participation, personal. And then if you guys are able to get the patient all the way down here to a personal conversation, the deal is over, right? The sale is made. And I could say that because you can't close somebody who is never open. And most healthcare providers do not meet somebody at the personal level because they'll say things like, wow, no one's ever listened to me in my, right? So no one's ever said that to me before. No, right now we're opening people up. Now, the cool part about this, just for time purposes, we call this thing dirt, right? We want to dig in the dirt a little bit. We want to even go even deeper, right? Hey, thanks for sharing, right? And being vulnerable. What's the duration? Where else is that impacting you? What's the root cause? And when did you decide that enough is enough? I need to get some support. Duration, impact, root cause, trigger moment. Okay. So we take people all the way down, which, by the way, we have sales call twice a week with front office admins. And we're on the calls there and they're showing up and they're like, hey man, call control, confidence, right? Conversation, purpose of the call, agitate the problem, level 3 conversation. It's over. It's over because we are open, we're connected, right? And we're not trying to sell the features. We're trying to sell the future, the transformation, the identity. Well, how do I know what that is if I don't connect with them here? Perfect. You guys cool with that? Helpful? Awesome. 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 So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and transition. Transition. There you go. I'm looking at this. I'm spelling it upside down, right? So transition. So what transition is we're simply just going to transition to the goal. Okay. That's all, right? We open somebody up. They got really vulnerable. And now I don't want to just pivot. I want to kind of build them back up again, right? So we take them down and then we're going to build them up, right? So we basically say, well, hey, thanks for sharing. What's the duration? What other areas is this impacting you? Do you know what the root cause of this is that's causing you to feel that way? And when did you decide enough is enough? I'm tired of being irritable and agitated and just kind of not showing up properly. When did you, well, yeah, that's why I called you guys. Okay, great. Well, curious, what have you tried? Okay, so what have you already tried? Well, I've tried physical therapy. Great. Well, what did you like? What would you change? Okay. So it's a what would you like? And then what would you have changed? What would you like? And then what would you change? Those are the two things that I want you guys to understand, is most people will say like, oh, well, what did you like? And what didn't you like? Well, no, you don't say that. You say, what did you like? And then what would you change? And then people are going to give you the goods. They're going to be like, well, I really liked the clinic. It was nice. It was friendly. It was close to home. Well, what would you have changed? And they'll say like, oh, well, I wish it was more one-on-one. I got to see different therapists. I didn't get to see the same therapist each time. I ran out of insurance. They said my authorization was whatever, right? They're going to tell you all the things that they would change. You'll thank them for sharing. And then ultimately it's just like, well, curious, what's the goal? And is that the short term or is that the long term? Okay, that's short term. What's the long term? Oh, you want to get back to running? Great. Is it just you run recreation? No, I have a marathon coming up. Oh, well, when's your marathon? So now all of a sudden we took someone from, I'm just starting, right, to open up to we're running a marathon. Great. So we see how we stretch the gap here. So I'm effective personally, and then we're stretching the gap to the point where, hey, I got a marathon coming up. Okay, so this is where we're going to go to transition to the goal. Now, I want to be able to intensify the goal. Remember, here I dug down in the dirt, and now we're going to go up, which, by the way, guys, this is a script. You just follow the script, okay? So now it's just going, hey, thanks for sharing. We have the event coming up. We have the marathon. Curious, did you ever think about how amazing it will be once you're able to achieve that goal? Okay, well, how amazing will it be once you're able to achieve that goal? And then they'll be like, oh, well, I can't wait. I've ran the marathon. This is my first time. Awesome. Well, hey, curious, did you put any thought into what would happen if you don't achieve that goal? So that's why when we're looking at this thing, we want to be able to go deep, right? We want to go down in the dirt, right? Duration, impact, root cause, trigger moment. And now what I want to do is we intensify, right? We want to stretch the gap here, right? And that's where it's just like, how amazing will it be once you achieve that? Have you put any thought about how amazing? And have you put any thought into what would happen if you don't, right? So that is called, right? I want to explain the cost of inaction. I want to explain the cost of inaction. Okay. So what happens here at the cost of inaction is I want them to feel it, right? Have you put any thought at what would happen if you achieved it and how awesome that would be? And have you put any thought into what would happen if you don't? Right. So I want them to sit with that for a second. Okay. Well, I think, we're both in agreement that, nothing changes if nothing changes. And here's one of the golden rules about sales. So anybody who ever feels weird about selling, the number one thing I always want you to do is just ask for permission to sell. Takes all the pressure away. So what does this sound like? So I think we're both in agreement that if, nothing changes, if nothing changes, would you be open to hearing about how we could help you? That's it. Okay. So this is where we're going to talk about new opportunities. And that's it. New opportunities. And what new opportunities basically are is you just take all the things that they said they liked and changed and just present them, right? They told you what their goal is. So just new opportunities. And this is where I want you guys, if you're following along and you're writing down some notes, is you always want to sell the future and not the features. Okay. Well, when you come in for eval, they'll do an evaluation. They'll do some manual therapy. They'll put some stuff. That's all the features, right? They'll do dry needling. They'll do soft features, right? Versus the future sounds like this. Okay. So when you come in for an initial evaluation, I will pair you with one of our therapists who specializes in runners, more specifically marathon runners. And they're going to come up with a custom plan of care to take you from not running and not training right now to get you back to not training all the way, but get you back to at least low impact training. And then they'll get you back to preparing for the marathon so that you could actually achieve your goal and run in the fall. How does that sound? That was a little wordy, right? So I would just say, maybe tighten it up a little bit. So I would say, I will pair you with one of our therapists who specializes in marathon, more specifically marathon rehab, and take you from where you're at right now, which is not running a ton, to get you back into training so that you can do the marathon in the fall. How does that sound? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Versus, we'll do an evaluation. We'll check your range of motion and strength and see where your deficits are, and then figure out, what the root cause of the. No. Okay. Sell the future, not the features. Okay. Now, also, you were mentioning that you would really like to be paired with just the same therapist each time. So we'll do the initial evaluation. But while I have you here, let's go ahead and book a couple sessions out with that therapist specifically. So if you need routine follow-ups, you'll get the same visits, same time, same dates with the same provider. Does that sound fair? Oh my gosh, that would be amazing, right? And then pillar number 3, whatever it is, right? So you would do 3 pillars, right? The main goal, and then 1 or 2 of the things that they want. And now you could leave into the next thing, which is going to be transition, another transition, right, to close, which also just means scheduling. Okay. Well, hey, if we could help you make this work, would you be willing to move forward? Awesome. And then when you say transition to scheduling, it looks like this. We call it the rules of 2. You only ask 2 options at a time. That's it. Super simple. So you basically say, hey, would Thursday or Friday work better for you? Thursday. Great. Which, by the way, you looked at the schedule, so you know that there's availability, but you would say, would Thursday or Friday work better? Thursday. Great. Morning or afternoon? Afternoon. Okay, great. 2:30 or 12 o'clock. So that's how we do like Thursday, Friday, morning, afternoon, Tuesday, 2:30 or 12. Okay, 2:30. And then you basically look at them, or you'll, speaking to them, and you say, is there anything preventing you from coming in at 2:30 on Thursday or 12 o'clock on Friday, whatever they decide? That's called a tie down. Is there anything preventing you from coming in? Great. Okay. Well, hey, before you show up, a lot of our patients love to fill out their intake forms. Right now we're heading into the last one, number 3, I told you, which is getting them to arrive. One of the easiest things you could do is get them to fill out their intake forms before they arrive. Because if they commit to filling out the forms, they'll make sure they show up. Okay. So how that works is just, hey, what's your email? I'm going to go ahead and send you over some intake forms just to get a little bit more of your history. Dr. So-and-so loves to review them before you come in. Can I count on you to fill out the forms and send them back to me in time? Great. So your appointment's on Thursday at 2:30. When can I expect you to fill out the intake forms and return them to me by? That's also a tie down, right? So we're setting rules here, setting boundaries. Cool. Okay. So just to recap here, that is the patient framework. We have purpose of the call, right? We're going to agitate the problem, transition the goal, intensify the goal, explain the cost of inaction, new opportunity, and then transition to the goal. Okay. So that is how we're going to clean up our front office. And then hopefully, as we're, implementing, because I told you I'm going to take over your clinic, I'm implementing a system. This is our registration system. So hopefully your leads, you're going to send them through what we call LISA, lead intake, schedule, and arrival. And then this is going to shoot out an evaluation. Okay. So as we put this system into your business, hopefully your team is averaging anywhere between 30 to 50% conversion rate off of cold leads. And then the goal is going to be 60 to 80% off of warm leads, and then 80% plus off of past patient reactivations. Okay. So that's where we're going to make sure we have that system. And, this is something where we have, weekly sales calls with your team. We're doing call recordings to make sure that those guys are saying exactly what they should be. They got a whole script that they're going to follow for the intake, which is really cool because it's just one piece of paper that they fill out, and then they have the verification of benefits. Awesome. Okay. So that is going to be registration, but now they're in the room. They're in the room, right? So what do we do with the roomies, right? The people that are in the room getting evaluated. So this is where we call it our custom plan of cares. Now, most people, what they do is they sell like a 6, 10 or 20 visits, or my in-network guys, they just kind of sell session per session. But remember, we are selling the future and not the features. So this is how we sell these things called custom plan of cares, okay, which is really, really fun. They're really, really exciting. So every single provider, and this kind of came up because I had a provider once, or an owner, I guess you would say, and he came in and he goes, hey man, like we are struggling to get evaluations. I said, well, let's look at it, right? So when we're looking at this thing, we look at LISA, right? Lead intake, schedule, arrival, benefits check, and then plan of care. I said, well, how many leads did you get? Right. And what we're doing is marketing. So I kind of looked at it and I said, well, how many leads are you getting for the week? And he goes, well, we're getting like 55. Great. I said, well, how many of those leads are you actually getting onto an intake call? And he goes, well, looking at our front office scorecard, we got 49 onto an intake call. Amazing. I said, well, how many of them are you actually getting them scheduled for an eval or discovery visit or whatever that looks like? And he goes, my front office was crushing it. I think they got like 26 people scheduled. And I said, well, how many arrived? I said, well, you probably have a drop off at arrival. He goes, no. He's like, we had like 22 people arrive. He goes, I think we only lost like one person at the benefits check. And I said, okay, well, what's the problem? And he goes, well, that's the thing. He goes, they come in for an eval. And he goes, we only had like 6 people sign up for plan of cares. I said, do you mind if I coach you for a second? He said, sure. I said, well, are you one of the providers? He goes, yeah. I said, well, you're the part of the problem, right? Your problem, hopefully you guys can see this, is that he's got good conversion rates, right? Can this improve? Sure. Intake to schedule, let's just say 50%, right? That could get increased a little bit, right? But that's solid. But he's going from 6 out of 21. He had 21 people show up for either an eval or discovery visit, and he only got 6. That's not good, right? So even if he had, right, 30%, he's like 30% conversion rate, right? We want to be closer to like 80%, right? So imagine if we go back to that number, 8 times 21 or 80% of 21, right? That's almost 16. It's like 10 more. Could change his practice. So what do we do? So I told him, I said, you got to learn how to sell custom plan of cares. He goes, well, we're not really a cash clinic, or you got to sell custom plan of cares. Okay. So what that looks like is we call it selling the 10 piece of a custom plan of care. So what that is the first thing we want to do is we want to figure out what is the patient's problem, which, by the way, you already did that on the intake call. So if you could put a system in place for your intake notes and then go to the provider, bonus. That's why we have a specific sheet of paper that the front office has that has all of this information. They just give it to the provider. So we got to figure out what the problem is. And remember, the problem could be broken down into physical, participation, and then personal. Now, is it, I talked to the front office and they said you're showing up irritable and agitated? No. Okay, hey, let's talk about your shoulder. How is that affecting your activities? How is that showing up for you personally? Remember, we have to have level 3 conversations. So that's the first thing that we do. And then again, we dig down into the dirt. We're just going to repeat it again. Okay. Now, the next thing during evaluation is most people just go right into the physical examination. They just skip over this. They just go right in the physical examination. And I'm here to tell you that is where most people lose I don't want to call it a sale, but lose the buy-in, right? They lose the buy-in from the patient. They lose the rapport. They lose the trust because they don't actually go from problem to this next thing. They just go problem right into the physical examination. So even if you go down here and you had a really nice conversation, right? It's kind of like, hey, thanks for sharing. Hop on the table. Let's go take a look. And the person's like, right? So now what we want to do is we go problem. What's the bridge here? The bridge is we got to figure out what is the payoff, right? What do they actually want to achieve by coming to physical therapy? Now you could ask it simply, hey, when you come in for physical therapy, what are you trying to achieve? In order for PT to be considered a success, what needs to happen? Well, I want to get back to running. And when you say you get back to running, do we run just around the neighborhood or no, I'm a runner. Okay, well, are you a track and field? Are you a marathon? Are you, ultra? Like, what do you do? Oh, I do triathlons. Great. When's your next one? They're like, well, I have the Ironman coming up. Oh, okay, great. So I don't know, right? So now all of a sudden you're asking what the payoff is, right? What's the payoff? And again, we're trying to stretch the gap here because if we go down here and we go all the way up, all right, how amazing will it be? Did you think about what would happen when you achieve it, right? Now look at this. I got a massive gap between the two. And the wider that gap, the more the buy-in that you get. Okay, so we need to figure out, and by the way, like once you do this, the rapport's there, the sale's already done, it's game over. Okay, people think money is the objection. The money is the objection because you didn't do what I just showed you. Okay, so when we're looking at this thing, we're going to take them down to the problem, that personal level, and then we got to go over here to the pay. Hey, well, what's the goal here? Is that short term? Is that long term? Boom. Okay, now what we do is we could do a physical examination. Now, one of my favorite things to do during a physical examination is we got to be able to show them that we know what we're doing. Okay. So if they are on the table and you say, okay, well, go ahead and look up. And they're like, it's a little stiff. And you go, okay, look down and then go ahead and look left. Oh, that's tight. And you're like, okay, now go look over to the right. Okay, hop up on the table. Let me do a couple things. Maybe do a first rib mode, maybe do some PA, maybe do like an SCM release or whatever. And now all of a sudden have a seat and they're like, oh, that's better, right? Because they were restricted rotation. So maybe you did some, upper cervical stuff, C1, C2, C3 to be able to free up some of that rotation. But now they're like, it's kind of like tight here. Okay, so maybe lower cervical tightness. And then you're going to go ahead and, So what do we just do? Okay. So this is something I love to do. It's called test. It's called treat. It's called retest. Okay. Test, treat, retest. Super simple. Okay. But if you want to be able to get a patient to be like this person, like they talk to me on a personal level, they ask me what my goals are. And then they did this woo stuff, this test, treat, retest thing. Like I am all in. I am all in. Okay. And the reason for this is because we need people to believe in you. We need people to believe in your process. And we need people to believe that you and your process will work for them. And this, my friends, is called the Trust Trinity. So if you can get people to believe in you, if you can get people to believe in your process, and then you can get people to believe that you and your process will work for them, that's all you need. That's the 3 horsemen of alignment in order to be able to get someone to align with whatever you're offering them. Okay. So we have the problem. This is number 1. We have the payoff is number 2. We have the physical exam is number 3. And now what we're going to do is we are going to create the plan of care. Okay. By the way, this is going to be a custom plan of care. So if you're, ever went to PT school, right? And you know how the body recovers, which I always think is interesting because people will say, I just do like 1 or 2 visits and then I send them home with a home program, which is fine. Like that's not me, but if that's you, that's fine. But I'm here to tell you that every book that I read, says that a tendon, a ligament, a muscle, a bone, right? A nerve, they all have different healing patterns. And 2 visits doesn't really add up to that, okay? The national average for length of stay for a physical therapy plan of care is 14 sessions. Medicare, their average is closer to 20, and that's why they had a Medicare cap, which was right around 20 visits, which, by the way, the progress note halfway is visit number 10. If you didn't know, now you know, okay? So when we're looking at this thing, right, we know that in order for bones, muscles, tendons, ligaments, whatever, to heal, there's phases. First, we got to go through the pain phase, right? Pain or problem phase, because sometimes people aren't in pain, but they do have a problem. Phase number 2 is going to be priming, strength, mobility, flexibility. Phase number 3 is going to be performance. Phase number 4 is going to be prevention. Okay. This is what we call the 4 levels of recovery. So when I'm coming up with my custom plan of care, I need to figure out where are they regarding pain, prime, perform, prevent. Now, you guys could create your own framework for how you recover the body, if maybe you're women's health or whatever, but this is mine. I go pain, prime, because we're outpatient ortho, pain, prime, perform, and prevent. Okay. So I need to be able to figure out most people need about 6 sessions or less to get out of pain if it's going to be able to get treated by physical therapy. Okay. Now, if there's 6 visits in, they're not out of pain and there's no real adjustment, that's where I might start looking at referral because there's probably something else going on. But someone with an acute, subacute issue, I should be able to get their pain done in 6 visits or less. Okay. Now for our clinic, because we did functional outcome measures, we knew we could get most people's pain done in about 3 or 4 visits, but we would say 6 because we had like a brand promise, right? We could get you better in like 6 visits or less because we knew that we can get them better around visit number 3 or 4. Okay. So ultimately, the next thing is going to be strength, mobility, flexibility, which, by the way, this is where you actually fix the root cause of the issue. Most people will sell a 6-pack, get them out of pain, and then try to sell them another 6-pack here, and they don't make that sale. And the reason for that is because patients don't have any pain anymore. Remember what my buddy said. He goes, physical therapy is the easiest thing to sell because people are actually in pain. So once you get them out of pain, it's hard to sell. So that's why we sell the whole package up front, not just incrementally. Okay. So hopefully that helps and resonated with some of you guys that like to sell lower packages. So we got 6, right? Priming phase. Well, honestly, like this sometimes could take anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks to build muscle strength, right? Or flexibility or, stability, mobility, whatever that looks like. Okay. So, and then it depends on the body part, depends on the person, depends. And then the last thing here is we want to get them back to performance. This is kind of like performance or even payoff, right? right? We want to get them back to their payoff. Like, what's the goal here? And once they're able to get that, obviously we want to make sure that it doesn't come back, and we go into the prevention phase. So the cool part about this, you guys need to understand, is people highly value getting out of pain. They highly value getting out of performance, right? Or getting back to their payoff, getting to their performance, or getting, to the payoff. They value prevention, but they don't value hard work. Okay. So that's why most people are going to drop off between visits number 2 and visits number 10. More specifically, between visits number 5 and visit number 9, because this is where the actual fun starts, right? And if you're not pre-framing the next visit, or you're not pre-framing the progress note, you start to lose people. Okay. So is that helpful with you guys? So now all of a sudden we are going to create a custom plan of care. So what this looks like is this. I need to go frequency times duration times my revenue per visit equals my custom plan of care. Okay. Because we're going to come up with a package price here. So remember, I'm showing you guys, if I came to your clinic and implemented my sales system, transformational selling, this is what I would do. Right. And this is what our clients do, and they crush it. Okay. So here's what we want to do. If I say it, they could disagree with me, but if they say it, it has to be true. I'm going to repeat that again. If I say it, they could disagree with me, but if they say it, it has to be true. Okay. So if I tell them, hey, Steve, I need you to come in like 3 times a week for 8 weeks, they could disagree with me. They might not believe that that's true. They're going to disagree with me. Okay. However, this is what this is going to look like. Okay. So I will say, hey, well, just curious, right now we're having a really hard time getting around. We're not able to run. I need to be able to get your range of motion up, your pain down. We then got to work on the root cause of the issue, get you back to training, increase your training, and then get you back to full marathon training. How long do you think that's going to take? Okay. So now here's the cool part. I asked them, how long do you think it's going to take? Now people will shy away from that because they're like, well, what if they say less than I thought, right? I think it's going to take 8 weeks. What if they say less? Well, what if they say more? They could do either one. Let's do more first because it's easier. I don't know. It's going to probably take like 12 weeks, probably 3 months. I agree. It will take 3 months if you do it on your own. But if you choose to go further and faster with support, it's only going to take about 8 weeks. How's that sound? Oh my gosh, 8 weeks, right? So they could go ahead and say a bigger number, and you say, I agree, it will take that long if you do it yourself. However, if you come to physical therapy, you do exactly what I say, you follow your home exercise program, you don't miss any visits, right? You got all those patients, they sign up, they say you're going to do it, and then they don't, right? You do exactly what I say. You show for your appointments. You do your home program. It will only take you about 8 weeks. Now, for any reason, if it takes longer than that, we could always adjust, or there might be something else going on. But based on my clinical experience, it's going to take 8 weeks. Not 4 to 6 weeks, not 6 to 8 weeks, 8 weeks with conviction. Okay? Awesome. Now, for whatever reason, they might say lower than that. I don't know, man, like 4 weeks. I need to get back ASAP. It's like, I agree with you. It will take 4 weeks to get you out of pain. However, I don't think the goal is just to get out of pain. You told me the goal is to get back to running a marathon. So we got to get you out of pain, which will take about 4 weeks or less. I agree with that. But you ever go to the gym, start working out, and just come out looking like Arnold? No. So muscles typically take about 4 to 8 weeks to respond and start to build strength. So in order for us to fix the root cause of the issue, that priming phase, it's going to take closer to 8 weeks. I'm like, I guess that's not too bad. Okay. Right. So you got to say, I agree with you if you want to just hit that. So is the goal this, or is the goal actually, the goal is actually that. Yeah, it's going to take a little longer. So before we move on, are you in agreement there? It's going to take us 8 weeks? Yes. So now they said it. Great. Now I want you guys to understand something from the frequency standpoint. Well, if you have 60 slots in our example that we gave earlier, and you saw patients once every other week, once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week, you would need 120 patients to fill your schedule. You would need 60, you would need 30, or you would need 20. Okay. Now, when it comes to our front office, our admins, would they rather do 20 intakes or 120? Yeah, 20. Would they rather, providers, would you rather do 20 or would you rather do 120? I would rather do 20. Owners, 20. Billers, 20. Marketers, 20. You guys get the idea, right? money aside, right? Money aside, would you rather see patients 3 times a week, or would you rather see patients once every other? Which one actually gets better patient results? Well, the APTA, right? The APTA found that 88% of patients who come in 3 times a week finish their plan of cares. 44% finish that twice a week. 14% once every other week, or once a week, or once a week, or once every other week, right? 14% only complete their plan of care. Pretty crazy, right? Pretty crazy. So now something I want you to be aware of is law of averages. So we won't see everybody 3 times a week. We won't see everybody twice a week. So that kind of leaves us with 2 numbers here, once or like twice a week. Now you can see the difference, but there was also a study. How is this so low? Well, the study was that if a patient was seeing greater than 7 days between appointments, they had a 63% chance of dropping off the schedule. And that's why hopefully we're not seeing people for once or less than once a week. Okay. So realistically, we are trying to make sure most of our patients are scheduled anywhere between 2 or 3 times a week. That's it. Okay. So when it comes back up to frequency, right, you tell patients that, right? It's like, well, do you want to get better in 8 weeks, or do you want to get better in 12 weeks? Well, 8 weeks. Okay, great. Well, I need to be able to see you for 3 times a week then. That's your commitment. Okay. That's what I need you to sacrifice. Just come into the clinic, 40 minutes, 3 times a week. That's it. Do you think you could do that? Oh, that's not too bad. Yeah, it's like 2 hours a week. You got like 168 hours in the week. It's only 2 hours. They're like, oh, that's fine. I just come. All right, cool. Right. Oh, I don't know if I could do 3. Right now we got to handle those objections. But we need to be able to say 3 times a week, 8 weeks, 24 sessions total. Cool. Before we move on, you guys cool with that? Right? See, super simple. Okay. So now what we're doing is we're creating a custom plan of care. Now I'm going to get to the revenue and stuff like that a little bit later. But now check this out, because I don't want to just go right into payment. I want to make sure that they don't have any plan objections. They don't have any partner objections. And then they don't have any process objections. So if I could cover those 3 things and then present the offer, it truly is just a money issue. So this is what this looks like. Okay. So as we're implementing custom plan of cares into the business, I then want to know they got a problem. They got the payoff. We did the physical exam. We now came up with the plan of care 3 times a week for 8 weeks. We know it's going to take 24 sessions. Okay. I showed them the 4 levels of recovery. They are bought in. Now what we want to do is we simply want to ask them perceived likelihood of achievement. Do you actually believe what we just mapped out is going to allow you to hit this payoff? Okay. Do you actually believe what we just mapped out will allow you to hit that payoff? Yes. Perfect. Well, I don't really, well, here's some hesitation. Well, I'm kind of just wondering how much this is going to cost. Well, money aside, do you actually believe this is going to work? Well, yeah, I mean, no, with 100% conviction, you actually believe that this is going to work? Yes. Okay. So now all of a sudden they are bought in. They have conviction. We are good to go, because they have to believe in you. They have to believe in your process, and they have to believe that it will work for them. Now, once we have them aligned with this, we can move on. Okay. And this is easy, right? This is easy stuff here, right? So now all of a sudden, do you actually believe in the process? Because I don't say like, do you actually believe in the process? No, do you actually believe what we maxed out will work for you? And hey, curious, do you have anything coming up over the next 8 weeks that will prevent you from coming in? Okay. Do you have anything coming up over the next 8 weeks that will prevent you from coming in? And they'll say no. Or they'll say yes. Okay, well, what do you have coming up? Right? I've had an eval before, and they're like, well, I got a business trip coming up. Okay, right? When is that? And they're like, well, it's 2 weeks from now. And how long are you gone? Well, 2 weeks. Okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll do 2 weeks of PT. When do you leave? When do you return? So we'll be off for 2 weeks, and then we'll just extend you out another 6. So we'll kind of still do the 8 weeks, but because you're going to be gone for 2, we'll just extend it out. So in total, it'll be 10 weeks, but we'll just do 8 weeks of care. Okay. So when we're looking at this thing, we have plan objections. So the next thing is just like, hey, is this a secret surprise, or does your family know you're going to be coming to your PT? Right? Partner, spouse, family, right? Work, whatever. Sometimes people have drivers, right? Their son drives them to their appointments. Well, I don't need to talk to you. I need to talk to your son because he drives you, right? So that's going to be a partner objection. Well, I need to go home and talk to my wife. Great. right? That's fine. So you basically say like, hey, totally get it, right? I would expect the same thing, right? It'd actually be weird if you didn't. So here's what we can do, right? How long do you think that'll take? You go home tonight, talk to her tomorrow? No, I'll talk to her tonight. Great. Okay. We'll go home and talk to her tonight. We'll go ahead and get you scheduled for your next appointment, 2 days from now. Gives you enough time. And if she's like, no, I don't want you to invest in your health. I prefer that you just stay miserable and can't sleep and do all the things that you're doing right now. Give us a call back and we'll take you off the schedule. Of course, she's not going to say that, right? The real objection is, can we make this work financially, right? And I'm going to cover that in a second. But, right, you throw stones at that and have a little fun and they come back. But make it easy for them. Like, hey, let's go ahead and commit. And for any reason, if you go home and they say they don't want you to do it, just come back and we'll cancel it, right? So I always want people to commit because it's easier to commit and harder to cancel, but it's a lot easier to cancel when you didn't commit, okay? So then the next thing that we do is we're going to move into the money, right? The financials. So again, here's that word again, permission. If you struggle with selling and you get weird about it, just simply ask like, okay, so just so I'm clear, right? You believe that this is going to work for you. We don't have any plans coming up. Family's on board, ready to rock and roll. The main goal is to get you back to running a marathon. Well, honestly, I guess the last thing is if we could help you make this work financially, would you be willing to move forward? Okay. So if you're in like cash or out of network or even in network, right? A lot of times we're just like, oh, the front office handles that. Great. Okay. You could actually like, as a provider, be done here. You're like, cool, we're bought in. And then after the session, you go up to the front, you're like, hey, here's the thing. They're going to do 24 sessions. They're bought in, right? They believe in the plan of care. They don't have any plans. Partner's good to go, right? You cover it. And then the front office could close them, or you could just do it. And I'll just show you how to close them. And then either the provider or the front office will close them. Okay. So what does this look like? Partner permission. So you basically say like, hey, if we could help you make this work financially, would you be willing to move forward? And now we want to be able to present the price. And the price just is really simple. Let's just say they're at 24 sessions and you're going to charge $200 a session. Okay. So what this looks like, I'm just using my calculator for you guys. So total package price is going to be $4,800. And you'll tell them that. That's your price. This is called your price anchor. And you say like, if you go ahead and sign up today, right, it's $4,800, right? If you go ahead and sign up today, most people go ahead and prepay in full, right? They go ahead and prepay in full. And then I can go ahead and give you 20% off. So instead of $4,800, it's going to be $3,840. And I'm going to be able to knock off $960. How does that sound? Now, most people, they're going to be like, that sounds awesome. That's great. Let's go, right? So that's option number one. And by the way, what we do there is we say, hey, it's $4,800. If you go ahead and sign up today, I can give you 20% off. So it's going to be $3,840 for today. And I can give you $960 discount. How does that sound? Or does that sound fair? Okay. And I'll just sit there and I'll just pause and I'll just wait and I'll listen for a response. Okay. Because ultimately what we want to be able to do is we want to make sure that they're okay with the price. They're going to think about it and they'll either come back and they'll say, yep, sounds good. Or they'll say, no, right? Option number two is we say, no worries. No worries. What most people do is they pay half today. They pay half later. And I could still go ahead and give you a 10%. I can't give you 20, but I could give you a 10% discount. So I could give you $240 off today. And we could go ahead and take $240 off. And what most people do is they go ahead and just break this down into like 3 or 4 months worth of payments. So what this is going to look like, $2,400 minus $240. So you would owe $2,160 today. And then we're going to have 4 payments of $2,160, which is $540 a month for the next 4 months. Does that sound fair? And again, I am going slow and they're just like, that sounds good. Okay, great. Now if they're like, no, I can't do that. You just basically say, what can you do? Most individuals will say, well, can I do like 20% off and do monthly? Sure. Okay. If that's what you want to do, right? We could do 20% off monthly. Or they'll say, well, hey, could I do, 10 or 20% off and just prepay
per session, right? So that way people might want to come in and they just do each session. Okay. So those are the 4 options, which is really cool, right? So because we'll have, prepay in full, 20% off, pay half up front now, half later, put it on a monthly payment, 10% off. Then we'll just say, well, what can you do? They've heard the 20, they've heard the monthly. Can I do that? And then the last one is going to be, could I just pay per session? Sure. Right. And this works for if you're cash or if you're out of network or if you're in network. And by the way, out of network and in network, they'll cover a portion of this, right? The deductible, the co-insurance, the copay. We could just use this as a price anchor. So for in network, it's basically like, well, this is what it would be. And, because you have your insurance, hey, good news. We typically charge, $200 per session. But because you have in network insurance and your deductible has been met, it's only going to be a $35 copay. That's it. Or it's only going to be a $55 specialty copay. And if you don't have that price anchor, then they'll think $55 is expensive. Okay. So now what happens here is after you present the price, you'll go ahead and collect the payment. Okay. That's where you'll do payment because we want to make sure that we have 100% of our patient responsibility is collected up front. Okay. We want to make sure we're not sending out a ton of AR patient statements, whatever. By the way, if you have really good over-the-counter collections, then you shouldn't have patient statements over $200. For whatever reason, if your patient statements are over $200, we usually pull those, we audit them, and then we want to be like, okay, were we collecting what we were supposed to collect? If not, we adjust. But we want to make sure that the majority of our patient AR is collected, right? Or accounts receivable. And if you're in insurance, like out of network or in network, then we would have insurance AR, but we want to make sure that the majority of our patient responsibility is collected at the time of service. Okay. Now, the other thing we do here is to finish this up is once we get the payment, then we want to go ahead and just pre-book. And what do I mean by pre-book is we want to make sure that all 24 sessions are booked out, right? Dates, times, providers. Right? DTP, right? We want to make sure that they have the same dates, times, and providers over the next couple of weeks because we want to build a habit with them, right? We want to make sure that they're in the habit of showing up for their appointments and in a routine. If it's all helter-skelter scheduling, then they're not going to be in a routine. It gets confusing and then they don't move forward. Okay, so that's going to be how we improve sales at the front office. And then how do we improve sales during the initial evaluation? Now, the other stuff is kind of easy, right? Because we want to make sure that we kind of put a bow on this because we got to take people from eval, right, all the way down here to progress note and then eventually to graduation. So what we want to do is we want to be able to pre-frame what's coming up, right? It's kind of like a good example of this is, you have the weekends, you have the weekdays, and you have the weekends, right? Because it's like Monday and Tuesday. It's like, how was your weekend, right? Wednesday's kind of like a hump day. And then it's like Thursday, Friday. It's like any plans for the weekend. It's like the same thing, right? Because it's just like when they're coming in for a routine visit, it's, hey, give me a takeaway or a big win from the previous session. Great. And then we, perform the session. And then it's just like, hey, what are you looking forward to the most for the next session? And by the way, when is it? What date? What time? Right? So it's just like we're pre-framing the next session. So a good, perfect routine visit script that we typically have is going to be, hey, give me a big win, give me a big takeaway between sessions, right? And some people will be like, well, I was able to run for the first time. Awesome, right? How amazing is that, right? And then you would do test, treat, retest model, test them out, retest, treat, right? Test, treat, retest, test, treat, retest, and then figure out what deficits they still have, do corrective exercises, do an education session, and then wrap up with like, hey, this is what we're doing really well. This is what we're still working on. And this is what we're going to do the next time you come in. By the way, when's your next appointment? And then get them to say it. And that is the perfect routine script. Super simple. Okay. Then you want to be able to pre-frame progress note. And then you want to be able to pre-frame graduation, which by the way, it says like, hey, you're 3 visits from now, we're going to do your progress summary. 2 visits from now, 1 visit from now. Hey, next visit's your progress summary. Today's the day, right? And you'll do the progress note. And then ultimately from progress, we're just going to basically re-enroll them back into their plan of care, right? Are we going to treat and refer, right? Or eventually discharge. That's the plan. And then once we're able to get them to graduation, then we want to be able to educate them on 3 things. Okay. So once they get to graduation, we would want to put a system in place first and foremost, right? They get a result. So then we want to be able to celebrate them. Okay. So we want to put a system in place to be able to, photo, picture, ring the bell, all the fun stuff, right? Have some fun with it in your clinic. You want to do a big celebration. But realistically, you got to sell them on leaving a review. You got to sell them on the fact that we want referrals and returns in the future. Okay. So reviews, really simple. It's just like, hey, you had so much success. And what I would love to do is at our next team meeting, I would love to be able to read your success story to our team. But also, I would love for you to be able to shout out some of the people who have worked with you along the way, myself included. So if you go ahead and leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it. But also, you might not be aware of this, but your review, other people will read, and it might inspire somebody who's on the fence to take action. And, we love to build our business to work with more people just like yourself, right? So here's the link, and then boom, leave a review. Super simple. The next thing is people don't know that they could refer. So what does referrals look like? It's just like, hey, most people don't realize that they could refer. If you have any friends or family that would benefit from our services, all I ask you to do is just put me, you, and them on a text or an email, make an introduction, and I will be able to handle that, or I will be able to take care of them for you, right? This is called a handshake referral. Super simple. It's like, hey, there's me, there's you, there's them, right? Because if not, you're going to be like, hey, did my dad come in? You're like, no. Like, oh, I told him to come in. And then the referral gets dropped. And then the last thing is going to be returns. Hey, you might not know this, but if you get a flare up, right? Same condition or even worse, a new injury, give us a call because we have a VIP program. We get all of our past patients in as quickly as possible, and don't hesitate to call us because most patients think they just need to see their physician to get back in. But based on the state we're in, we actually have some really good direct access laws, and you'll be able to come in to see our providers, our doctors first, and you can bypass all that other stuff. So just give us a call. So if you educate them on getting a review, a referral, and a return, that is where you guys are going to be able to multiply your sales. Because ultimately the goal here, as we look to kind of put a bow on this thing, is that you'll have quick win sales, and then you'll have more referral and reputation sales. And eventually there's going to be crossing this line here where all of your reputation sales will surpass your reach sales. And then now all of a sudden you don't need to spend as much to acquire a customer, and your cost to acquire a customer will start to go down. Now, the only thing that happens here is this just takes time. Okay. So usually like 1 to 3 years in business, you rely heavily on reach. And then between 3 years plus, you will build a big enough reputation. Okay. So those are some of the things that we will put in your clinic. Now, obviously I can't go over everything on this video. So we do have a workshop coming up here in just a couple of days on more transformational sales. We got scripts, we got blueprints, so on and so forth to be able to give you and your team. So make sure you click the link in the description or in the comment area to be able to gain access to that. But for now, make sure you guys go implement some of these techniques into your business and go ahead and start crushing some of your conversions. See you on the next one.